Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet and let's get started. What was the most lucrative reason someone at your place of employment was let go? Part 6. Ben, one of my former coworkers, struggled greatly with absenteeism. The guy might be scheduled for 5 shifts a week, but he might only show up for one of them. After a few occasions, the general manager learned that he was in dire need of the funds and that he needed to be rostered. She continued to roster him, but he failed to show up. He missed one entire week of work without missing a shift. We all kind of assumed then that he had dropped out because he had decided the job wasn't for him. Our staff Christmas party was held on Sunday. Who do you think showed up? Ben. This was a fairly low-key staff Christmas party. The company isn't providing food or drinks for us. I know, it's lame. When it came time to pay, Ben took out his father's card and began explaining that he was so poor that he couldn't even buy drinks for himself, so he needed to bring his father's card. Ben spoke with our general manager while he was there, expressed regret for his absence, and begged her kindly to assign him shifts for the following week. She complied. That week, Ben did in fact show up for 1 or 2 shifts, but when Ben went to work on Friday, someone noticed the time and said, "Hey, wasn't Ben rostered to start 5 minutes ago?" The GM called him and stormed off. He expressed regret and excused himself, saying he was having dinner with his grandparents. That's when she fired him. I have nothing against people taking time off when they need it, but this was a very peculiar situation. It felt like he was just taking the pee and seeing how much he could get away with, almost for fun. I have no idea what was going on there. 2 scenarios. The first was when I worked for a freight company cleaning graveyards. One of the temporary employees they brought in to help with a spike in volume made the decision that he was there to work and not to talk on the phone. He was supposed to be moving freight, but instead he would talk on the phone for 10 to 15 minutes every hour. It would be brought up by someone that he was supposed to be working, but he would just ignore them. He was, I believe, the only employee there that I've ever seen fired. The other man was working on a building site. Having recently completed his vocational training, he was now beginning his practical experience. He was walking back and forth looking for handfuls of nails when he decided his tool belt was too heavy and uncomfortable. Upon observing his boss using his phone nonstop for a few days after starting work, he made the decision to start using his own phone for communication. For those who are unclear, it's expected that you take business calls on your personal phone while working. Although carrying a phone with you in case of emergency is acceptable, you shouldn't use it for personal conversations while working. He was fired on the Thursday of his first week due to his lack of interest in genuinely learning the job and his growing propensity to talk on the phone when he was meant to be building forms. A week later, his father approached the boss to inquire about what happened. Apparently, the man was so upset that he had refused to look for work because he didn't think he could handle it. The supervisor gestured to one of the workers, an immigrant from Eastern Europe who had built over 30 houses, beginning in his native country, where he had been trained to build houses all by himself. The supervisor remarked, "He's right when a guy like that gives your son tons of awesome advice every day, and your son ignores him and brushes him off because he's on his phone. He won't succeed in his endeavors." The father reportedly chuckled and said, "Yeah, okay, that is unquestionably my son. I'll discuss work ethic with him." Although there was never going to be a chance for him to work for us again, maybe he was able to make some changes in his life. I've just realized that in both situations, which occurred before smartphones were invented, the final straw was talking on the phone when the person was supposed to be working. These days, I can't imagine a job site like that. It must resemble a daycare facility. I was helping to hire my replacement while working in IT and recently received a promotion. This woman seemed okay, so my former boss, who was tired of conducting interviews, made her an offer. I disagreed, but that wasn't my call. She then requests to start the Friday before her scheduled start date because it's a holiday weekend and she wants to be paid for the weekend before she starts. She pushes her start date twice for dubious reasons. I tell my former boss I believe there are too many warning signs. She becomes enraged because she doesn't want to go through the hiring procedure once more. I don't touch it. When Lady finally gets going, I offer to accompany her to a nearby office so we can set up a number of new machines and I can also train her on how to do it. Just some cable management, nothing too crazy. When I go to show her one, she acts like she doesn't want to be shown. After showing her how to do it, I let her go ahead and begin setting up a station because she's eager to get started. When I return after setting up two, she had already set up one and cables were all over the desk. She becomes irate once more and tells me it's okay when I tell her we can't leave things this way. I tell her it's okay. I was brought here to demonstrate proper technique, so this is my fault and I won't be leaving this place disheveled. I'll redo it and go ahead and fix what she did if she doesn't want to do it correctly. She then makes an attempt, but I have to go back and fix a good portion of what she did because she didn't seem to care that it wasn't perfect. After we're done, I inform my former employee of what transpired and take a new job. In less than a week, she issues an order at approximately 11 a.m. that causes all of the company's workstations to reboot. As if that weren't horrible enough, the phone system crashed because it couldn't handle so many calls at once, and all the computers rebooted simultaneously. In total, it took 1 or 2 hours and most likely a few $1 million to settle. Not only did she not care, but she also attempted to conceal the proof that she had done it. When discovered, she attempted to assign blame to others for not having trained her to not restart every system in the organization. The next day, she was let go. My former boss was sick of conducting interviews, but she should have been fired before she even started. It turns out that 3 blocks from her and her husband's apartment was the grocery store where all of the missing credit and debit cards were headed. It also appears that some of the former employers should be contacted by the new employers. The work might have been hired at a location much closer to home, but those managers might have been made aware of the new workers' unlawful activities at the establishment of previous employers. To distance herself from the location where the cards were stolen, she was driving for an hour each way, but she wasn't shrewd enough to do the same on the other side. It turns out that particular employee would buy more stuff on the way from work, steal more cards while working, and make purchases on the way to work. The companies at which the cards were used draw a line connecting points A and B, from her house to her place of employment. After one phone call and a manager check of the security cameras, Heather, her name is not Heather, was asked to vacate the property. She and her husband were locked up for a long time while they investigated the crimes. 241 counts last I heard. Each. Share your horrible experiences/story from living in an HOA condominium or with jerk neighbors, part 6. So, one of my parents' neighbors called the government complaining that the paint on my parents' house was an eyesore. Although it was almost winter and they planned to wait until summer to completely renovate the front of the house, new windows, a new front door, fresh paint, they still needed to repaint it. No, sorry. The government sent them a notice threatening to fine them if it wasn't completed within a specific window of time. Some days, it had already dropped to negative 15 degrees, and they expected us to labor outside by ourselves doing all of this construction work. In an attempt to provide some cover, we attempted to tarp off the front of the house. Unfortunately, we received yet another complaint from the government telling us that we had to complete the work outside because the tarp was such an eyesore. To assess things and to make more threats and the like, they started sending people to my parents' house. Work was slow because both of my parents worked full-time and then part-time. We could only provide so much assistance at the time because my brother was lost in his own world and I was attending school. It was a huge pile of nonsense. The government claimed that the neighbors had every right to voice their complaints, but when my parents voiced concerns about some very obvious issues that these neighbors had caused, the government told them they were out of luck. It doesn't seem unsightly to park a big Greyhound church bus that takes up half the road on a tiny residential street. The HOA in my previous neighborhood was terrible. They picked flaws in everything. Additionally, they would fabricate an apology in place of expressing regret for a mistake. For instance, I received a letter telling me to clear the grass out of my flower beds. However, they weren't. Twice a year, we hired landscapers to maintain the beds and plant flowers. In addition, I made a daily weed check. The flower beds were exquisite, but the beds of our neighbor next door were completely overgrown with weeds and grass. When I contacted the HOA, they first said that they must have sent the incorrect letter before continuing to explain how my husband had broken the rules by failing to blow the cut grass off the sidewalks. Aside from that, we had a lawn care company that was always tidy. The HOA then attempted to claim that they were required to blow as they go. Saying, "Oops, we had the wrong address, sorry," would be so simple after all. The HOA is great in my new neighborhood now. Everyone in this tiny neighborhood just wants to see the area well kept. I was invited to join the board, and I've discovered that everyone's really understanding. In fact, the management company has written to the homeowner about 3 separate instances in the past few months regarding violations, which were actually covenant violations. Every time we've disregarded the management company's requests and given the homeowner the freedom to act as they pleased. The pool in our HOA is maintained by the members themselves. Even though we've had a security guard for the last year or so, there are countless acts of vandalism every year that irritates me to no end. There have been instances where individuals have torn the pickets off the iron pool fence. The stones that surround the pool have been torn up and destroyed by people. When you arrive first thing in the morning, you frequently find everything scattered everywhere, including shoes, t-shirts, shorts. Before we had a security guard a few years ago, I almost got into 2 separate fistfights with other residents. In the first instance, a father allowed his 8-year-old daughter and her friend to visit the pool by themselves, which is prohibited. I asked them to leave because I didn't feel safe having them there by themselves. They left on their own volition, but the father returned after about 15 minutes and began yelling at me. The second instance occurred when a man broke open the pool gate with his kids. What a dumb example he was, as he had not paid his HOA dues and was without his access card. When the police arrived on the scene, I called them, but they informed me there was nothing they could do about him because he was on HOA property. I've had teenagers lip off to me for telling them not to act like A-hats and destroy the pool. Here they were, jumping up and down on the big metal-framed lounge chairs that had been dragged into the pool. They gave me the runaround when I asked them to stop and return the chairs to their original location. For the past 3 or 4 summers, we have had security guards, but it's never a sure thing if we'll get a good guard that day. We had a guard that summer that I was completely unaware of. She was this huge woman, like so big she didn't fit into a normal chair and could barely walk, in a filthy shirt and ragged shorts, and I didn't even know she was the guard till she started yelling at these teenagers for making out. "Y'all stop that! I'm the security guard and I says stop that right now!" But our guard from last summer was the worst ever. He was way too serious about his work. He would get up and wander around the pool, which is fine, whatever, wander around the parking lot, and I would occasionally catch him gazing out the window of the house next to the pool. Along with a few other residents, I reported him to the property manager, but she never took any action. I told a board member at the Labor Day party that since this creep had been looking through car windows once more, we ought to make sure he wasn't back for the summer, including myself. The board member, who is kind of a jerk anyway, screamed in my face that the guard had overheard what I'd said and that it was my fault that he quit so the pool wouldn't be open until the end of September like it usually is. One of our current board members is actually a board member illegally according to the CC&Rs. According to the rules, nobody who is a renter can be on the board, but the board president is. The man on the other side of our cul-de-sac is the quintessential HOA stickler. He wants to fine people for minor transgressions without even issuing a warning. The summer following our move in 2021, his seat was up for re-election. I ran against him and prevailed. The other members of the board are reasonable individuals, and I believe the neighborhood has exhaled collectively now that our neighbor is no longer on the board. Naturally, he started to target me. He sent me emails requesting that the board address his extensive list of grievances, yelled at me to pull up my weeds from the other side of the cul-de-sac, and most recently, he reported me to the city for hiring an electrician to perform small-scale work without a permit. He's an older man who's been unemployed for 15 years. When his wife is at work, he spends his day smoking cigarettes on his front porch and people watching. However, I got even with him over the permit issue. Sincerely, I had no idea that such small electrical work required a permit. However, in the end, all we had to do was pay $75 for a retroactive permit and undergo a quick inspection. This also taught me that installing a lawn irrigation system requires a permit, which he did last summer and ironically turned out not to have. I saw that he had a plumber and a lawn care expert over the day after I reported it, and the city is now aware of it. I'm assuming he lost more money than the $75 we spent. He ought to have handled his own affairs. If you want to watch the part 5, click the link here. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for support.